Daniel had always been a part of the family. Since their earliest days, he and Mark had shared an unbreakable bond, brothers in every sense, save for the ties of blood. Naturally, he was a constant presence. Evenings filled with culinary delights, festive occasions, evening libations in the garage with Mark. He had become an integral part of our existence. Secure, recognizable. Up until that evening, it was merely an intimate dinner at our home. A handful of companions, excessive indulgence in wine. One after another they all departed. All but Daniel. Mark had drifted into slumber on the couch, weary from the demands of his day. I lingered in the kitchen tidying up. Daniel entered softly, cradling 2 glasses of wine in his hands. "You don't have to face this by yourself," he murmured, placing one gently in front of me. A smile graced my lips. Weary. We engaged in conversation. It begins with the small details, films, melodies, the weight of existence that seems to grow more burdensome with age. Then more profound matters. Mark's recent distance had become quite noticeable. At times, I found myself feeling more like a mere shadow in my own marriage rather than an equal partner. Daniel simply absorbed the words. Truly attentive. For a fleeting instant, it felt as though I were conversing with someone beyond my husband's closest companion. It was as if I were conversing with the sole individual who truly recognized my existence. At last, when I raised my gaze, I found his eyes locked onto mine. Not informal. Unwelcoming. Something different. A shift occurred in the atmosphere surrounding us. He parted his lips as if on the brink of uttering a thought, but then came to a halt. He merely offered a smile. Gentle. Melancholic. "You are worthy of so much more than being overlooked," he murmured softly. And then he departed. Yet the heaviness of his words lingered. For the first time I saw him in a new light. Not in the manner of a brother-in-law. Not merely Mark's closest companion. Yet there was a man who suddenly consumed my thoughts. Initially it was understated. Daniel started visiting more frequently. At times it involved delivering something to Mark. At times it was merely a matter of breezing through the area. Yet I observed that he appeared only in Mark's absence. On a certain afternoon, he arrived bearing coffee. "I thought you might appreciate some company," he remarked, a subtle smile playing on his lips. I nearly mentioned that it wasn't needed. Yet the reality was, I longed for companionship. Thus I granted him entry. We gathered around the kitchen table. The very table where I had shared countless solitary meals in silence. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, concerning the realm of music, reflecting on the books that have gathered dust over the years, reflecting on the small moments I hadn't even noticed I longed to share with another, and the manner in which he gazed at me. It lacked courtesy. It remained focused. It was there. Eventually I found myself chuckling, truly amused. It was an odd sensation. In that fleeting instant, the weight of my solitude slipped from my mind. As he rose to depart, he lingered momentarily at the threshold. His hand lingered gently on the frame, as if he yearned to speak yet hesitated, caught in a web of uncertainty. "Your smile brings me joy," he murmured gently. A warm blush crept across my cheeks. I merely nodded in reply, choosing silence over words. As the door clicked shut behind him, an eerie stillness enveloped the house, amplifying the silence that lingered in the air. Not the typical silence. A more substantial one. Now I found myself unable to shake off the way he expressed it, playing it over and over in my mind. The gaze he cast upon me in that moment was unforgettable. And I understood. If he were to return once more, I wouldn't discourage him from doing so. Once again, the evening found Mark toiling away into the night. As I lounged on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, the television murmured softly in the background, merely a companion to the stillness around me. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Daniel. I didn't even inquire about the reason for his presence. I simply moved aside and welcomed him in, as if it were the most instinctive action imaginable. We gathered in the living room. Initially, the dialogue flowed effortlessly. We reminisced about the mischief he and Mark used to find themselves in during their college days. Life now felt profoundly altered. More subdued, more burdensome. Yet gradually the dialogue began to change. "You've changed since the first time we crossed paths," he remarked, his tone gentle. Could you clarify what you mean? I inquired. He inclined his head, observing me as if he could perceive something I wished to keep hidden. In those days you radiated. You seemed more buoyant, more joyful. This moment, he left it incomplete. Yet he chose not to. The word struck me, leaving an ache that lingered. I gazed at my hands, searching for the right words to express myself. And then softly, perhaps I've simply grown accustomed to remaining invisible, I murmured. A moment of silence lingered in the air. Then his hand, warm and steady, enveloped mine. It was merely a whisper of contact. Yet it remained. At last, when I raised my gaze, I found his eyes fixed intently on me. Unwelcoming. Not informal. Something greater. Perilous situation. A subtle change swept through the atmosphere. Weighty. Stillness. I ought to have retracted my hand. Yet I refrained. Yet he remained still as well. We lingered in that stillness, suspended in a moment that resembled the brink of a precipice. On the brink of collapse. As he finally departed, the hour was late. Delayed beyond its rightful time. That night, as I lay in bed beside Mark, my mind was consumed by the memory of Daniel's hand resting on mine. How effortlessly straightforward it was. How misguided it was. Oh, how I longed to experience that sensation once more. The evening was graced by a gentle rain. The sort of rain that envelopes the world in a gentle embrace, rendering everything more tender, more serene. Mark had departed for the night, caught up in yet another late meeting he chose not to elaborate on. Seeing Daniel was not part of my plans. I chose not to call him. Yet he arrived regardless. I wanted to ensure you weren't feeling lonely, he remarked, lifting a bag of takeout and wearing that small, deliberate smile I had begun to recognize. We dined in the kitchen, spoke as we always had. Yet, an unusual essence lingered in the atmosphere. He occupied a space nearer than he typically did, insufficient to be apparent. Yet it was sufficient for me to sense his warmth, even across the distance that lay between us. There came a moment when I uttered a few words. I can't quite recall what they were. Yet my voice faltered. I never intended to convey a sense of sorrow. Yet I did. And he observed. Hello, he murmured gently. Gaze upon me. I turned my head and his gaze was so soft, so unwavering it nearly shattered me. In that moment he extended his hand. His fingers gently swept a lock of hair away from my face. Gradually. Yet he pressed on. His fingers hovered, delicately outlining the curve of my jaw, pausing gently on my cheek. It was an elegantly understated gesture. Yet it seemed to embody something much deeper. I remained still. I was unable to. The atmosphere grew still, broken only by the gentle patter of rain against the window pane. My breath hitched in my throat. My heart races. And in that instant, as his hand rested gently on my face, I understood. I craved something beyond what I had. Endless possibilities await. As he finally withdrew his hand, silence enveloped the moment. He merely gazed at me, as if he were anticipating a signal. Yet I withheld one from him. Yet I didn't reject him either. We were both acutely aware of the implications behind it. The hour was late. It is now beyond the point for him to remain present. The rain persisted, enveloping the house in a silence from which I could not break free. The living room was our gathering place. More intimate than ever. The soft illumination of the lamp served as the sole beacon in the space that separated us. I can't quite recall the subject of our conversation. As my mind drifted, the words began to blur into an indecipherable haze. All I could sense was him. His presence enveloped me, a comforting warmth radiating from him, while his eyes seemed to seek mine, as if drawn by an irresistible force. A moment of silence hung in the air. A lengthy piece. Then he leaned in closer. Gradually. With great care. Allowing me the opportunity to intervene. Yet I refrained. I was unable to. As his lips met mine, the touch was gentle, somewhat reluctant. Yet as I returned the kiss, it intensified. Initially hesitant, then building in intensity, as if we had been waiting in silence for an eternity. His hand glided to the nape of my neck, drawing me nearer. My hand lay against his chest, absorbing the rhythmic pulse of his heartbeat beneath my palm. It unfolded at a measured pace. It was not awkward. It was bound to happen. As he finally withdrew, we remained in silence, simply sitting there together, gasping for air, gazing into one another's eyes. "We ought not to," I murmured. Yet the words seemed feeble, for the simple reason that I was unwilling to cease. The expression in his eyes revealed that he felt the same way. As he departed that night, he offered no farewell. He lingered at the threshold, as if anticipating a shift in my resolve. Yet I chose not to. As soon as the door clicked shut, I brought my fingers to my lips, still electrified by the recollection of him. And I understood that this was merely the start. Sleep eluded me that night. Not following the kiss, I reclined in bed next to Mark, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, the faint memory of Daniel's lips still hauntingly present against my own. I reassured myself that it was merely a fleeting instant, a vulnerability. Such a thing would not occur once more. It was impossible. However, the following day I discovered myself tidying up the house, igniting a flame within a delicate vessel, donning a dress that had remained untouched for months. Upon hearing the knock at the door, I acted without a moment's pause. I welcomed him inside. Our conversation was sparse. We no longer feigned that it was solely about the company. As the door clicked closed, he advanced in my direction. This time I took the initiative and leaned in first. It was I who initiated the kiss. It felt unlike the previous night. Increased assurance. More ravenous. It was as if we both understood precisely the direction it was headed. His hands rested on my waist, gliding up my back, drawing me nearer until every inch of space vanished between us. My body surrendered to his, enveloped by the warmth of his breath and the soft murmur that escaped his lips as I whispered his name. I made no move to resist as he hoisted me onto the couch. I allowed him to explore, his fingers gliding over the contours of my body, as if he sought to imprint every curve in his memory. I pressed on without hesitation. In that instant my desire simply faded away. When it concluded, he remained, embraced me as if it transcended mere longing, imbued with significance. In that quiet moment I came to understand. It was clear that this would not be a singular occurrence, for the simple reason that I wished it otherwise. Following that second instance, all pretense vanished. Daniel no longer required a justification. He didn't arrive bearing coffee or tools. He didn't bide his time for Mark to leave the city. He simply arrived, and I consistently welcomed him inside. The nights were merely a part of it. At times, it would be the height of the afternoon, with Mark immersed in his job and the home enveloped in stillness. We would gather around the table as if time had stood still, indulge in a cup of tea, discuss matters that have long since faded from others' inquiries. Yet, the manner in which he gazed at me, gentle, unwavering, brimming with an emotion I hadn't experienced in ages, rendered it unignorable. And soon the conversation would come to an end. It would begin with a gentle caress of his fingers against mine, a fleeting gaze that held on just a moment too long. Then he would draw nearer, and I would allow him to do so, each and every time. It no longer felt like merely an affair. Seemed essential. It felt as though he was occupying a void within me that had lingered for so long. I had nearly forgotten it existed. One afternoon, after we had shared our time in the bedroom, he lingered beside me, still lying there. His hand meandered in languid circles on my arm. "You understand that this isn't merely a diversion for me, correct?" He spoke softly. I glanced in his direction. "Could you clarify what you mean?" He offered a gentle smile, tinged with a hint of melancholy. "I believe I was captivated by you long before I even acknowledged it." My heart clenched tightly within my chest, for I was aware. I found myself descending as well. More than mere sensation, more than mere attention-seeking. For him, what truly filled me with dread was not the secret, but the fear it instilled within me. It transpired on a Thursday afternoon. Mark returned home earlier than usual, an occurrence that was quite rare for him. Daniel had arrived ahead of time. We found ourselves in the living room, nestled together on the couch, uncomfortably close. His hand lingered on my thigh, a touch that was both perilous and intoxicating. In that moment, a sound reached my ears. The sound of the front door unlocking. Mark's voice echoed through the air. I stood still, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. Daniel stood still, caught in a moment of disbelief. In that fleeting moment our eyes locked, and a wave of panic surged between us. Then he shifted. Swift. He retracted his hand, rose as if nothing had transpired, and strolled nonchalantly to the kitchen just as Mark entered. I remained in my seat, attempting to calm my breath, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. "Hey," Mark remarked with an easy nonchalance. "What are you two doing?" Daniel wore a smile that came effortlessly, almost too effortlessly. "Simply conversing." Once more, she was recounting the saga of the leaky faucet. Mark remained blissfully unaware. Naturally, he did not. He snatched a beer from the fridge, planted a distracted kiss on my cheek, and ascended the stairs to change. And in an instant, we found ourselves in a place of safety. As soon as Mark disappeared from view, my gaze shifted to Daniel. Yet the expression in his eyes was far from relief, undeniable force that could not be overlooked. As the evening wore on, Mark ventured out to retrieve takeout, leaving Daniel behind for what he claimed would be just a minute. And in that fleeting moment, he pressed his lips to mine. More challenging than ever. Starving. The danger seemed to intensify his desire for me. And I returned his kiss as if I were equally adrift. For that reason The hour was late. This time we found ourselves in the guest room. The solitary one, untouched by anyone. I reclined against him, his arm encircling me. The rhythm of his heartbeat slow and steady beneath my ear. For a time we remained silent. Yet, in that stillness, his voice shattered the quietude. "I can't continue to exist merely as this," he murmured gently. I raised my gaze, a sense of bewilderment washing over me. "What do you mean?" He gazed at me, truly gazed at me with a look I had never encountered before. "Merely the person you turn to in moments of solitude. Merely the companion who slips in and out of your existence when Mark's gaze is elsewhere. I desire something beyond this." My chest constricted. I desired more as well. Yet how could I possibly voice that? "Daniel, this is quite intricate," I murmured. He gave a subtle shake of his head. "It's only intricate if you continue to feign indifference. Say it isn't so. Confess that I'm not on your mind when he's around. Please tell me we can return to the way things used to be." I was unable to, for he was indeed correct. He crossed my mind, even in the moments when Mark was present at home. Even with Mark lying right beside me, I remained quiet. In that stillness, Daniel found his answer. He pressed his lips gently to my forehead, his fingers gliding softly through my hair. "I love you," he murmured softly. "I find myself questioning how much longer I can continue to conceal it." The words struck me with the force of a tempest. Because their desires transcended mere wanting. They were faced with a decision. I found myself uncertain about whether I was truly prepared for that moment. Yet, as I nestled in his embrace, a truth emerged that I was reluctant to acknowledge. I had already made my choice in him. Each and every time. It no longer felt like a secret liaison. That night was different. Not when Daniel arrived after Mark had drifted off early on the couch. I ought to have advised him against coming. The door should have been locked. Yet I refrained. He simply walked in. He entered silently, as if he were meant to be there all along. In that fleeting moment, as our gazes intertwined in the soft glow of the hallway, uncertainty vanished entirely. Silence enveloped us. We were genuine. He pressed his lips against mine the instant the door closed, and I responded with a fervor that felt like a lifetime of longing had culminated in that very moment. This time there was no sense of urgency. It was not taken without permission. The pace was languid, profound, burdened by the unspoken truths that lingered between us, yet were understood all too well. As the moment came to a close, we lingered in each other's embrace, our breath soft and steady, the gravity of our actions lingering in the atmosphere. "This secret can't remain hidden for long," Daniel murmured. And I recognized the truth in his words. For it had transcended mere longing. The experience transcended mere solitude. It revolved around our connection. As I lay beside him, a revelation dawned upon me, one I had previously resisted acknowledging. When I envisioned a future, it wasn't Mark that occupied my thoughts. It was indeed Daniel, the man destined to be akin to a brother. the man I was never meant to desire. And yet, he was the sole witness to my presence, the sole presence that rekindled my sense of vitality. As he departed that evening, I lingered at the threshold, attuned to the distant hum of his vehicle receding into the night. And I understood, with a nauseating hushed conviction, he was the one I had already selected. Even if I had kept it to myself, even if the world would never absolve it, the path forward was irrevocable. Not at this moment. Never.